Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a singer-songwriter based out of Charleston, South Carolina. Kicking off her artist journey just 4 years ago, she's already got multiple releases to show for it. At the young age of 21, she is only on her way up to great heights and even greater songs. Welcome, Macy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I always like to kind of kick things off with just kind of getting an idea of what your background is in music and how your kind of music journey all started.
hmm I have been singing since I was like 7 years old. Kind of typical story. I grew up like singing in church and everything. And I always think about how like nervous I was. And my first memory of singing was literally singing in my grandma's church, and my knees were like knocking together because I was so scared. So come a long way. But yeah, I just did a bunch of local, statewide, and national competitions after that. I had the privilege of representing my middle school at the National Beta Club talent competitions for like 2 years. And then I got signed by an agency when I was about 11 years old, and that opened a lot of new doors for me, especially in acting and modeling as well. So I kind of got to try my hand at a bunch of different art forms, which was really cool. And through that, I met my current producer and co-writer. His name is Robbie Rosen. He was an American Idol top 16 contestant. So I always think that's really cool. But yeah, he just kind of helps me produce my songs. He's really the one who encouraged me to get into writing original music and releasing it and everything. So he has really helped me a lot in this process. And I've just been kind of going on that original music journey ever since.
So at what point in your like big timeline did things kind of turn into, oh, I'm like starting to write these songs, and then even, oh, like let's start like putting things out there and let's start just kind of doing the artist thing.
hmm So I would write songs, kind of like every little future artist in a little notebook when I was in elementary school. And later on, I realized that I subconsciously like plagiarized all the melodies from like Disney Channel movies and songs. So I wasn't like that into it. But after I met Robbie, he was helping me like audition for all the shows, like American Idol, America's Got Talent, all that stuff. And I was kind of like over it. And he was like, you should really just try like original music. And my first single I released was in 2019, and that's literally like the first song that I've ever like actually written. And I released it, and I still have it to this day, which I feel like is kind of an anomaly that doesn't really happen, but I'm really proud of it. And I've just been trying to explore my sound and everything since releasing that song, and just kind of playing around with it.
No, I mean, I think you're right in saying that that is a little bit of an anomaly. It's usually like maybe even a year later at some for some people that it's like, yeah, I don't really like that anymore. So, I mean, good for you if it's 4 years later and you're still loving it. Um, what when it comes to writing music, what do you think oftentimes inspires a lot of like what you write about?
In the past, I've been very inspired by art and I guess other people's stories. If you look at my EP Hamartia, which I released in December 2021, all of those are kind of based on different characters throughout history or in famous stories like Oedipus and Eve and Electra. And I just really liked the idea of kind of taking inspiration from other people's work, but making it my own and telling those stories in a different way. Now I'm kind of like, I don't want to say over that, but I feel like it's a little bit harder for me now. I don't really know why. But I've been kind of leaning into my own like personal experiences more, which is also kind of difficult, but I feel like it is very valuable. So I would say most of my inspiration now is coming from my own like life and feelings and situations and stuff.
Where did you come up with the name for the EP? Like I've never like I don't know if that's a similar thing to the Oedipus and Electra kind of thing where it's like a name, but I'm not familiar with it. So where did that kind of come about?
It's not a name, it's like a literary device. So in high school English class, I just remembered like the different things we were talking about. Like, there's one called like Deus Ex Machina. I probably pronounced that terribly wrong, but it means like God is the machine, and that's one of like those themes. Hamartia is another one. It means fatal flaw. So if you listen to the first track, which is Hamartia, it's kind of talking about what I see as my own fatal flaw, like perfectionism. And then it kind of explores all the other characters' fatal flaws. So like Eve and Electra, all those characters, and it's just kind of telling their story from the flawed perspective, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I think I must not have paid very much attention in high school English class unless they're teaching something different not down in South Carolina. But no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a really kind of cool perspective. You don't see that kind of thing a lot, especially like not only just taking that as a concept and applying it to your songs, but applying it to different like character stories you're essentially writing about. Um, Kind of going off of that and how you said you're kind of shifted into more of your own experiences now, do you think shifting from a like storytelling perspective of someone else's stories versus taking on your own, do you think that that kind of shapes the way that you approach writing the music and like the songs differently? Do you think like shifting into a personal perspective shifts your approach at all?
Yes, definitely. So Hamartia, like it still had its times of being very difficult, and I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. Like I can't figure this thing out. But it kind of feels like it was a breeze to me compared to where I'm at now, because I feel like for every character, they already had their own story set up, kind of their own like vibe and sonic like aesthetic I could hear in my brain. So when we wrote Oedipus, I was like, oh yeah, like dark and gloomy and stuff like that. And then when I wrote Juliet, I was kind of like, oh, I want to feel like I'm in Italy or something. Um, but now I'm just like, well, how do I find a sound like for myself that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a weird thing to go about. And I feel like lyrically it's the same because I've always been like more proficient at that, but with the like instrumentals and everything, that's where I'm kind of struggling right now to figure out like what is the Macy sound for what I have to say.
And I mean, granted that I mean all of it technically is the Macy sound. It's just obviously other stories and things. But do you think that when it comes to producing these songs, you'll take any inspiration from Hamartia?
I might I think right now I'm kind of going a slightly more R&B direction. I've been really inspired by Ariana Grande's Positions album, and of course SZA just came out with her album, love Summer Walker's album. So I've been really inspired by the more R&B sound lately, but I mean, definitely if I feel like some aspect that I used in Hamartia would lend itself now, I wouldn't be opposed. So
I mean, that would kind of make things a little bit easier, probably.
yes.
um, Going off of that, if you had to kind of define the Macy sound as you put it, into kind of like a genre of its own, obviously you're still kind of figuring out what that all sounds like, but if you like with that R&B influence, if you kind of had to put a new genre-esque name to it, do you know kind of what you would go for?
I mean, when people ask me what genre I sing, I always say like pop with an R&B influence. Um, so I guess I would say that, but yeah, I feel like genres and everything, it's kind of hard to categorize. Even like Hamartia, I feel like you would have trouble categorizing it into a single genre because some of the songs are kind of similar, but then you get to the other ones and they're like, oh, this is like a little different. So, yeah, I just kind of like to vibe and put whatever out there. I don't really consider genres unless I'm like pitching to playlists or something, and even then I'm kinda like, "Oh, I don't know."
Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of become a whole different thing where it's like you get all of these subgenres. Like pop is so broad anymore. And like it's always been a little bit broad because it really just is what's popular. But at the same time, it's like somebody could like the Taylor Swift side of pop, but not like the SZA side of pop or the Phoebe Bridgers side of pop or anything like that. So it is a very like complex kind of answer. Um, is there a release that you've put out so far that you think kind of best embodies um, who you are as an artist, like as a whole, in the sense of like if you had to sell someone on becoming another fan of yours, what song would you show them to convince them?
I would I have 2 in mind. So, actually, I would probably say In and Out, because I feel like since it was my first piece of work, I wasn't so, like, in my head about it, so that's a lot. I rewrote it, like, 6 times, but I feel like it was kind of like a more, pure baby form of me, not, like, trying to figure out, "Oh, like, how am I gonna promote this? Is this, like, in line with my other stuff?" Things like that, but maybe I would also say Juliet off of my EP, 'cause I don't know, I just feel like the songwriting kind of reflects my vibe, like, I talk about Murphy's Law and stuff like that, um, and so, yeah, I would say either Juliet or In and Out kind of summarizes my vibe the best.
Um, no, I mean, there is no wrong answer. I think you're probably one of the few who will be like, my first release is the one that I think will give you the best kind of showcase of me. Because a lot of people like you start somewhere and you evolve into a different sound, and then it's like, well, that stuff's not even reflective of what I'm doing now. But I think like to still be able to look back at it and say that there is still a very true and accurate piece of you as an artist in that song from well, what is now like 4 years ago is a strong feat for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, Um, if you had to pick a couple artists, like two or three artists that you think your music is kind of like a combination of, and that could be from the perspective of lyrics, that could be from the perspective of the sound overall. Who do you think as like a formula or combination reflects you?
I would say definitely Ariana Grande because she is probably my biggest inspiration. The main thing I feel like I kind of take from her style, I really love to play around with harmonies and stuff, and she is like the queen of that. So I always love that every time I listen to one of her songs, even though I've been listening to her literally since like she was on Victorious, I still feel like I can hear like a new aspect of it, which is really cool. Let's see. Maybe like songwriting wise, I'm very inspired by Lizzie McAlpine, and I love how she can kind of like paint a visual picture in your head or like a storyline with her words and her songs. So I'm kind of aspiring to do that more now. So I've been listening to her a lot and kind of trying to, I guess, study her songwriting and stuff. I don't know if I can think of a third one. I mean, I listen to so many people, but I don't even know. I guess like I said earlier, the kind of like R&B influences and tendencies I'm having now. Like I said, I've been listening to Summer Walker a lot. I love Jasmine Sullivan. I'm always trying to get better by singing along with Yeba and stuff.
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, I guess those girls are who I'm kind of trying to um, be up to par with, I guess.
No, that I mean, I think the Lizzie McAlpine crossed with Ariana Grande, it makes sense for what at least like Hamartia as far as that goes. Like listening to that, I think that those are accurate kind of reflections. They're an interesting combination because they're two like obviously very different styles, but taking different elements from them and combining them can be something really cool.
Mhm.
Plus Lindsay McAlpine is all the rage these days. She is something of her own when it comes to lyrics. Is there any outside passion of yours, like not necessarily directly music related, that you think impacts who you are as an artist? What kind of like any element of your like musicality, if you will?
I am definitely a jack of many trades. So I am kind of a nerd, I guess you'd say. I was valedictorian of my high school. I came into College of Charleston in the honors college. I'm very like into learning, I guess. So if you couldn't tell by Hamartia, me taking a literary device from high school, I definitely think that lends itself to my songwriting. Like every songwriting session that Robbie and I have, it's at least like one moment in that session where I have to like look up a strange word and convince Robbie that it makes sense and it's okay to use. Um, like one of my unreleased songs that I'm sitting on right now is called Anamnesis. Don't ask me for the definition because I probably would fail to tell you right now, but it makes and once I release it, I'll make sure I'm prepared. But so yeah, I like to use weird words kind of and just weird symbolism sometimes. I am also somewhat bilingual, so I would love to bring that into my songwriting as well. But also on the business side, I'm weirdly very into learning about like finance and stuff like that. So I think it's very important for artists, especially independent artists, to kind of be keen on the business side so you don't get like played or whatever. So I think that definitely helps me as like a businesswoman for the music that I'm making. So yeah.
No, I mean the valedictorian and everything makes a lot of sense because you're sitting here saying like I incorporated Murphy's Law into this song, and I'm like, I think I know that Murphy's Law is a thing. Couldn't tell you what it is, but it like sounds vaguely familiar from high school. Um, that kind of brings me to a question of like, where did you kind of get the idea for the concept that you put into Hamartia, like telling these different stories, like the Oedipus thing, all of that. Where did that kind of come from, and what made you choose the stories that you chose to tell?
So I wrote the title track of Hamartia like a year before like I even thought about making an EP. And I just kind of sat on it. I wasn't really sure if I wanted it to be a single because up until then I had just released singles. And then I took a class called Understanding Creativity, and we were kind of keeping a creative journal, I guess, of different activities and stuff we were doing, different exercises, ideas, stuff like that. And I was kind of like, I don't know what the heck to write in this thing. Like, I don't really have anything come to my mind. And I looked at Hamartia and I was like, this means fatal flaw. Like, I could just make a whole project off of that. So I kind of brought it to Robbie and he was like, yeah. Robbie's so funny. He's just kind of like go with the flow, vibing creatively. And then I'm kind of like, oh, let's write about Murphy's Law and all this stuff. And he's like, okay, I guess. But yeah, I brought the idea to him. And of course, he was like, well, yeah, I'll help you with it. So I honestly think I just kind of took the characters off the top of my head. Like, I knew I wanted to have Eve in there from like Adam and Eve because it's kind of the whole story if they like brought imperfection and stuff into the world. So I thought that would be cool. And everybody kind of knows the story of Romeo and Juliet. Um, and yeah, I think I just kind of did a little bit of research for Oedipus and Electra, but everything kind of fell into place. So very fortunate for that.
No, I mean It definitely is, just like I said earlier, like it's a very unique kind of approach to writing a project, especially like an EP, kind of where it's all together and it's just like the characters aren't necessarily all connected directly. Like it's not, they're different characters from the same story. They're just different characters all with fatal flaws, and that's kind of what ties it all together. And you don't even directly like address it being like, oh, Hamartia is like fatal flaw. It just,
Mm.
it's got that underlying songwriting thing where it's just like it's right below the surface, but if you're paying enough attention you'll catch on.
Mm.
What do you think would be the like ideal listening scenario for someone to like listen to your music? Like what, like set the scene, what do you think is like the perfect situation for your music to be played?
That is a very interesting question. I would say maybe like in headphones or like earbuds so you could hear all the little intricacies of it. Because sometimes I'll play like a new mix through the radio and stuff in the car and I'm like, this sucks, this is terrible. But then I'll put my headphones on and I'm like, wait, it kind of slays. So I don't know. But as far as like environment, I feel like it kind of depends on the song. Like crystals, I remember my friend Kayshawn told me he imagined like driving through downtown, like where all the everything is kind of lit up and it's night and you kind of have like the top down and stuff. I guess you'd be like in your sad girl hours, like listening to it. But Hamartia, I wrote Juliet in the bathtub, so maybe that would be a great place to set the mood. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a personal thing. I've never really thought about that. So that's a very interesting question.
I think the bathtub answer is a very interesting answer.
Yeah.
I've never had somebody come on here and at least admit that they wrote any song in the bathtub, so you're a first for that.
Listen, I wrote Juliet in the bathtub. I wrote Heartless on my friend's back because she was carrying me because I was scared of the crabs crawling on the beach. I wrote Electra like in my voice notes driving down the highway, not typing, but it was recording my voice, so it wasn't that unsafe. But yeah, I I feel like inspiration strikes at whatever time and I just listen to its call. So
I mean, yeah, I mean, you never know what it's necessarily going to happen. I get some of my best ideas walking my dogs. So it's just like you don't know what's going to happen, but just very interesting that all of the songs themselves have stories on how they were told or how they were like written.
mhm.
Um, what is it that you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
I would definitely say my business savviness and I guess um like my what's it called, like the inclination to learn more about it because I feel like not that a lot of artists like suck at it, they definitely don't, but I feel like it can be kind of like a laborious thing or like a necessary evil for creative people. But as for me, like I feel really interested in it and even like helping other artists, I feel like I don't want to gatekeep anything. Like I said, my friend Kayshawn, he's an artist as well. And even in our collabs together, like I've always been like, I don't know if this is like a great idea business wise, or he'll like come to me for advice sometimes, which is really cool. But yeah, I would say like having that business-ish mindset to go along with the creativity and not just kind of like floating through it. But that also kind of is a fatal flaw in itself because I like overthink everything about it. But I would say it kind of sets me apart. And if I go into any kind of deal or collab situation, like I am prepared to talk about those business details rather than be like, oh, let's write a song and we'll figure out how to put it out. So yeah.
No, I mean, it's just like being on social media where it's one of those things that you, in this day and age, you kind of have to do to grow and have everything, have all your ducks in a line, if you will, as far as like the business thing goes. And a lot of people don't like it, but
Mm.
it is kind of a key component to succeeding and growing forward and making sure everything is the way that it's supposed to be and you're not missing out on anything. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think most people know that there's like 4 different like ways you can get royalties. People
Mhm.
probably just are sitting there with their DistroKid set up and maybe an ASCAP or BMI and calling it a day. There's a couple more.
Mhm.
So just that alone is something I didn't know for the longest time. So the business thing is a huge thing to make sure that you kind of have put together. So good for you.
Thank you.
What kind of impact do you want to have with your artistry, with your music?
Oh, that's such a big question. I mean, I think now that I am starting to write more personal stories, I mean, it's always good if you can kind of help somebody, I guess express feelings for somebody who doesn't necessarily have that avenue. Even me, like as a singer-songwriter, I feel that way about other songs and projects and artists. Like it's just a very comforting feeling to listen to something and kind of feel seen by it, which would be really cool. And on the other side of the coin, I mean, I would just definitely love to make an impact on other artists. I am definitely the person like liking every post, commenting, liking everybody's stories, sharing their songs, like everything like that. I just love to try to be as supportive as I can. So, more than just my dream and what impact like I want my music to make. I want to be able to support other people in getting their music heard and their dreams realized. And that's something I am very passionate about.
Which is fantastic. I mean, it is, we're kind of in this state where you don't need a label to do it anymore.
Mhm.
People like, I mean, some people, a lot of people, I think, even from the independent state now want that. You don't necessarily need it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it isn't a requirement to make a living doing what you want to be doing when it comes to music. So, and I think a lot of that kind of stems from if we're not treating this as a like community and we're running the rat race ourselves, it's not going to go anywhere. So right now, what the independent music world kind of needs to do is do exactly what you're doing and support the other people doing the same thing, because it's only going to help the entire independent music situation grow and make it easier on everybody and including yourself. So that is huge. I think more people need to be doing that.
Mhm.
um, I think that brings us to the last question that I ask, that is kind of the premise for the podcast itself, which is why music?
Why music? I just feel like it's an integral part of me. I feel like it was what I was born to do. Even times when I hate music, I still love music. And even times when I want to take a break from it, I catch myself like singing and still like kind of studying other people. And I'm like, I thought I wanted to take a break, but I actually don't. And yeah, I mean, after being in this industry for what, like 13 years, I guess, if my quick math is right, and not, like, feeling over it, I feel like that definitely says something um for the fact that I feel like it is a piece of me, and I was just, like, born to do this in some way or capacity, so, yeah, I mean, the question is why music, but I feel like why not music? Because it's, like, no other option to me.
I think that's a great kind of way to put it. You're not the first person to say, well, why not music? But it's true. It's like it's kind of one of those questions where it's like it seems so profound, but it's like, what else? What else would there be? Like for the people that are doing this kind of thing, it's like I I'm not doing it because it pays the bills, because right now it
Right.
doesn't. You do it because that's where your heart's at. And I think that kind of delivers the best product at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Well, with that, I think that concludes this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another interview with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.